Catus, Maximus here, this time with a quick review of this eBay 3-piece pinless universal joint set. These were actually sold as, I believe, Craftsman's, but they certainly don't have Craftsman, they just have chrome vanadium. So these are some pretty cheap universal joints, but I did want to talk about them for a second because they are a pinless design. This is not a four-wing, this is a hex design, but I was intrigued by a set of these that were actually designed, that were impact style sockets, but are chrome, or adapters, but are chrome vanadium and chrome plated, so they are for hand tool usage. So I kind of like the idea of that, just because any type of constant velocity joint, and that's what these are, is as you're rotating it, you don't get any kind of binding. You do feel a little bit of wobble as it rolls over each edge of the hex, but it's much better than, say, traditional ones, where when you start getting a heavy binding angle, the way the centerpiece sweeps over, because the pins, the angles that you're deflecting at are offset, it tends to be a little bit wobbly. They can jam up if you get too far over, and are not quite as strong as these, believe it or not, because there's more material in the square than there is in this pin. So usually when these break, it's either the pin or maybe one of the wings. And look, I even own a snap-on tool, my one snap-on tool. So we can see that they are quite a bit larger than what would be considered a traditional universal joint, but nonetheless, that non-binding action is pretty handy. Even though they are larger, they are indeed smaller than a pin drive style. This would be a traditional pin drive style impact because of the pin that splits this little ball here in order to drive these. So I thought I was pretty intrigued by these. They were super cheap. They're like $8 or something like that. And I thought, even for, cheesy Chinese ones, at least they're chrome vanadium, and there'll be a few situations which I would appreciate. Now, obviously, the other, I should say, detractor from these is the fact that they don't have a very steep angle. It's about 30 degrees, where you can get steeper angles out of traditional universal joints, as we can see here, and still have them at least reasonably operate, although beyond 30 degrees they start getting rough. So that is an advantage. The traditional ones are more compact and can operate in steeper angles, but they're much rougher in operation and obviously a lot weaker. So I thought this would be handy just for hand tool operation. One thing I thought was interesting is they made the anvils super long on these, so they just totally fit very deep in the socket, which they need to, because the ball detent spring is not very strong. Actually, this particular 1/4 inch doesn't have a very strong spring in it at all. It does have a backing spring which pushes this forward just to give it a little bit of tension, but if you have any socket on there, it's pretty weak on the 1/4 inch. It's a little better on the 3/8 and of course on the 1/2 inch. These aren't perfectly made, but they're actually not too bad for how cheap they were. So anyway, I just wanted to do just a quick little comment about them. Now, where these style come in particularly in handy is if you have them on the end of the extension. It seems traditional universal joints kind of really want to wobble around, and that's kind of the nice thing about these hex styles, is that the fact that they do limit their motion. Part of the time it becomes a limitation because they don't bend over far enough, and half the time that's exactly what you want, essentially, because it makes it a little bit easier to deal with, and then you can just ratchet in a fastener without having to worry about actually holding down here, which is something that you have to often do on a traditional one. Is now you can just ratchet like normal, and you don't get any of that binding or kludginess. It's actually, they seem like they're pretty decent as far as, I don't think these would hold up to an impact wrench if you ever used one on it, but for their price, I was looking around, it's hard to find chrome versions of these types of universals. Also hard to find a camera that will focus properly. So anyway, that was my short little video. You can certainly use impact pinless universal joints as standard, but I thought it was intriguing that there seems to be this one little gap of finding pinless style universal joints that are just made for non-impact use, just for normal hand tool use, so you can get the nice clean chrome ones. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been subscribing, and if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.